Hello, hope everyone's doing well today. My name is Dante-Ezekiel and the emotion I chose to speak about is anxiety. And here's just a little bit of a table of contents of what the topics we're going to cover here in this presentation. And, the usual, the intro, the research questions, the method, the literature review, the definition, items to measure, and basically research trends. So I want to start off by saying, talking about why I actually chose anxiety. Anxiety is something that we experience in different phases of life. It's sort of that feeling of helplessness, uncertainty, and just, not feeling like we can prepare or take control of a certain situation. So I wanted to take that idea or that emotion and make the relation into the sport consumer, perspective. So anxiety is an emotion that is experienced through every phase of sport as a consumer and also as an athlete. So here's a couple of things that might be a little more helpful in understanding it. So, how can anxiety be measured in sports consumer behavior context? And then we're going to develop items to measure the sports fan perspective. So just here's a little bit of something for the presentation. For the research questions, we're going to define the concept of anxiety in sports fan perspective, develop the items to measure anxiety, and then we're going to talk about a couple research trends. So basically, I found these two theories that give a little bit of a better understanding of anxiety in sports. So we're going to break these down a little bit. So we're going to start off with competitive anxiety in sports theory. So this theory was created about 1990s? What about 28 years ago or so? But basically, when it comes regarding consumer behavior, it stems from the behavior of being a truly competitive fan, being truly committed. Being a truly committed fan plays into the competitive anxiety. We tend to adopt the emotions that our team are going through. It all stems from the idea of stress and uncertainty. These honestly can be seen as a never-ending cycle. As you might understand this, but spectators can often be the cause of anxiety in athletes, and it can be the other way around. And these athletes feel like their performance is what might cause spectators to become anxious. So, and then second of all, the second theory I want to speak about is the multidimensional anxiety theory. So basically, the multidimensional anxiety theory, we could literally talk about this for hours. But long story short, it's based on three key terms. The idea of state anxiety, which is the emotional state characterized by apprehension and tension, and the combination with activating the nervous system. There's cognitive state anxiety, which is worrying and negative thoughts about one's performance. And then the somatic state anxiety, which is moment-to-moment changes in a perceived psychological arousal. So that kind of sums up a little bit of this theory. So next, I want to talk about defining anxiety in sports fan perspective. Feeling anxiety as a spectator can be much worse than an athlete due to the fact that you have no control over the circumstances. You must basically just blindly place your faith into a team with the hopes that everything will go well. But this, for most fans, these are teams they've been rooting for their whole lives. So, and this emotion is often felt more serious by a sports fan who has something to lose. So I want to get more into that. A sports fan who has something to lose may experience consumer anxiety because of, there might be money at stake, luxuries, or, just plain old bragging rights. There's people that come together every year and pick an NFL team and they stick with that team to the bitter end in just the hopes that they win the Super Bowl. Even though they might not physically gain something, it's pretty good to have bragging rights, kind of makes you feel like you're, a special fan, like you're above everyone else. But basically, I only did 2 interviews, and for the first interview, I asked how has anxiety affected you as a sports fan? And participant 1 basically answered saying, I experienced anxiety in different phases of my life. Watching the Panthers play constant close games during the season and often lose made my anxiety build up each game as I began to expect the worst result. So this kind of plays into the idea that experience sort of affects that anxiety. So it's sort of like a buildup. It's like a deja vu feeling. And we usually don't know how to act. And for the second interview, I asked participant 2, most tend to believe that fan anxiety is blown well out of proportion. Do you believe this is accurate? And they answered by saying, yes, anxiety is a real thing. It can affect us in all phases of life. Being a former athlete myself, I experienced it in different ways. So basically, that's just a little bit of an insight from someone who is is a consumer, someone who loves sports, and someone who also participated, and they've said anxiety on all stages is pretty bad. So I wanted to take something from the internet to kind of give you guys a little bit of perspective of what it is to actually be a diehard sports fan. So I found an article basically called, Why Your Favorite Team is Slowly Killing You by Andrew Daniels. And he basically says it's worse than when you make a bad decision, because with sports fandom, we love our teams. We live and die with our teams and have well-being tied up in our teams, he says, but we are helpless to do anything about it. When we toss and turn over a bad decision, at least it was our decision. So that sort of plays into the idea of consumer anxiety, where you're kind of like helpless, where you have no control over the actual situation. And this is something I found online to sort of measure sport anxiety. So this is the sport anxiety scale. This scale specifically is mostly for athletes, but as I sort of read through it can easily be related to consumers, because it's kind of the same feeling. Because anxiety comes with the same sort of idea or the same symptoms. And for my research trends, I found this PDF from Crimson Publishers, which was basically a study about sports anxiety. And basically their objective was to find out the perception of players regarding the effects of anxiety from psychological perspective, B, to assess the perception of players regarding effects of anxiety from the psychological perspective, and C, to evaluate the perception of players regarding anxiety from behavioral perspective. So it basically plays into all three phases of anxiety. So for our discussion, I wanted to basically give a couple questions. So first, what leads to fans building this emotional connection with their team? Number 2, what other factors play into anxiety that we might have missed in this presentation? And also, what are some techniques we can use to help, aid these emotions? And reference, and here's a little something for you guys tuning in. I really appreciate you guys tuning in with me, sticking with me. I know it wasn't the best presentation, but I'm really working on it. And I appreciate everyone who tuned in, and everyone have a wonderful evening.